one thing you mentioned too, I want to key on is unit
Yeah.
count because
Yeah.
in this society, it's like a badge of honor to people
Yeah.
who don't have any units, right?
Yep.
And people throw out their unit count.
Yep.
And sometimes they're like, oh, yeah, I got 1,000 units or whatever. And it's great. Congratulations. 1,000 units might be, it could be storage units.
Yeah, it's true.
There's a big difference between storage units
There
and
is.
family housing and then having a multifamily building. There's also a big difference in cash flow.
Yep.
And I know some people that may have 100 units, 200 units, and they don't cash flow as well as some people with 20. There
It's
is a
true.
big difference,
Yep.
right? So for people listening, and I hear this, like if you hear large unit counts, that might be great. They might have a system, but that doesn't make them better than somebody with 10 or 15 or 20 units. And you have to be, like you said, humble, have humility behind this because that person with that 10 or 20 units might have a system or have a tip or a trick that can make you with your 100, 200 units a lot of money.
Heck yeah. We had a boot camp literally this Saturday night. And the guy says, we go through the process. He goes, all right, I took the advice that you gave me last week. He goes, I went and I called all my insurance companies. He goes, I saved $12,000. I literally just went like this. And yet I can't convince people to listen.
Yeah.
If you want it, you want it. And if you
Yeah.
don't, you don't. And that's fine. Don't take it. But I mean, I've got 51 buildings. I got 145 units, but the most impressive number that I have is 50. And my number of 50 is LTV.
Mm.
That's the most impressive number
Yeah.
I have is 50 LTV because I can lever any asset. The market goes down 30 points. That doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. And so you want to find people that are where you want to be. And the issue is that I didn't show up and get 51 units, 51 buildings. It was slow and steady. The first 5 years was five. The next 5 years was 8 or 10, maybe, buildings. And then the next 5 years, or no, actually it was like only 2 or 3 for the next 5 years. And then it was, 7 to 10. And then it exploded
Mm.
because then it was, I'm going to cash out refi, make sure that my debt isn't too high, make sure that all of my properties still make 20 or 30%. But I want to tap into all this equity because then that's going to be my expansion phase because I'm only in my 40s. That's going to be my expansion phase. And then I did 24 in 2 years
Yep.
because I saw the hole in the market, which was very low cost of debt. Number one. Number two was multifamilies were not increasing in value nearly as fast as single families. They weren't. And so I went on a spree. I bought twos, threes, and fours like they were coming out my ears. And I
Mm.
still believe that that's the most undervalued asset in America today. And even better, Fannie Freddie gave you the golden ticket. Now you can buy it with 10%, 5% down.
Yeah.
5% down. I couldn't get that. I get 25% down and I'm giddy. And
Yeah.
they're buying at 5%. Doesn't get much better than that.
Something else important you wrote or you mentioned was knowing your market. And I think a lot of people don't know the market that they are in. We hear a lot. Do you invest particularly just in your market? Do you invest out of state or?
I've looked at a lot of out of state stuff. The way that I feel about out of state stuff now is if I did anything out of state or out of area, I would, because I have size of where we are now. If I did anything like that, I would want it to also be of size because I have to spin up a whole team. I have
Yeah.
to spin up the people, I have to spin up the contracts, I have to spin up all of that stuff. And for me, I think one of the biggest, I hear self-managing, I hear property management, I hear property managers, I hear remote investing. You can be all those things, but what I'm most concerned about is being an operator. I
Mm.
am an operator. I operate my entire portfolio. I do not have a PM. I operate my entire portfolio.
I
All
think
those
it,
units.
it, at a certain scale, it just doesn't make sense, right?
I think so. Yeah.
I think if you're getting started, you have a W-2 job, and that occupies a lot of your time. But
Mhm.
I think for most of the bigger like the bigger guys in real estate, I've talked to Ken McElroy. He has over 2 billion in assets, and all his property management is in house. It's all in
Absolutely.
house, and when you start thinking about the cut you would take from giving away property management, that becomes a part of your system eventually. So
Absolutely. And I think that, hey, if you want to have somebody that doesn't own your asset, has none of the risks, but makes more than you, have a PM.
yeah.
And
It's,
that's where
it's scary to think about that too.
it is. Someone's like, oh, well, it's only 8%. Great. You're giving them 8%, but you're only making 15% on your asset. Now they make more money than you do, and all you do is own it.
Yeah.
And so, do they care as much as you do about the end result? Do they care about your name in the neighborhood? Do they care about your reputation with the local banks? Do they care about that stuff? They likely don't. Do they care about your name with the city? They likely don't.
Yeah. And then especially when you get started, it's tough. I would say for me, it was tough to get a property manager ever because that 8% was more for my growth.
Yeah.
That's me I held on to, and that might just be my personal experience, but I held on to that money to reinvest in the
Heck yeah.
community. So
Do the math. You're doubling the amount of money you're keeping when you don't have a property manager. Not
yeah,
only are you doubling the amount of money you're keeping, but that means that cut the amount of time that it's going to take to get to your next rental in half. That's what that means. That means you can grow twice as fast without a PM. So in the landlord course that I did, it was all about self-management processes, all the things that you document. We call it documenting your unit. That's what we really focus on, is to empower people to become those property managers for themselves, even at a distance.
yeah,
You can still deploy a plumber 1,000 miles away. It just doesn't need to go through the PM first. That's
yeah.
all.
And you
We
save
actually,
a step.
yeah, one of the things that we do is we actually hire real estate agents, not as W-2 employees, but we hire them as contractors. And what we do is we literally pay them $30 an hour to be rental agents.
Mm.
Now, are you getting some 60-year-old agent with 30 years experience? They're insulted by the offer. Fine, go away, bye. Now I've got agents asking me, can they become agents? Because I've got one primary agent, I got a backup agent as well. But the primary agent that I have, when she's busy, she's only sending me an invoice for that stuff. She works for other landlords too. But I've reduced the cost of renting out my units by 75% over what it was costing me over what it would cost me with a PM. 75% reduction.
Think about the money saved, the money to help you scale to the next deal, the money for you could spend for CapEx if you wanted to, you
Yep.
know.
Yep. And I trained her. I was on location with her. I was like, this is how I want you to walk people through the unit. This is what I want you to bring up to them. These are the questions that if they ask them or say them, those are red flags. These are the things that we require of our tenants, and it's non-negotiables. And so just training her, and now I know that's made her a better agent for other landlords in the area, but that's fine. Like, rising tide lifts all boats. Most importantly, I'm her largest source. And she's thrilled to do business with us. I won't bring her on as an employee because I want her to have the flexibility to work with everyone else.
Awesome. And you mentioned the first 5 years suck. And a lot of people they are terrible. And I remember my first five too. And it was just like, man, is this what everybody talks about? Is this the money I'm supposed to be making? It just didn't make sense for that first 5 years. And then you mentioned training that person. No, that was probably part of that first, setup of the systems, getting the systems developed. And I think that was one thing that sucked for me was like, okay, I got to get these systems in place to start working for me. Right.
Yeah.
So if you want to speak on that first 5 years and what you took away from it, most importantly.
Mostly black and blues and debt. That's what you take away from the first 5 years. It really is about recognizing that, like you said, there wasn't bigger pockets. There wasn't YouTube. Like, I used YouTube until 2020, till the pandemic. I used YouTube for one thing: music. That was it. That's what I
Yeah.
used YouTube for. Didn't use it for anything else. Education, forget it. Wasn't doing it. And then I explored and I saw, wow, there's some educational stuff on here. This is kind of cool. But the first 5 years are really very painful. You're usually living paycheck to paycheck. When you get the call that a hot water heater's gone, you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
I hope I have enough space on that credit card. you know?
I'm laughing, but that is really how it was, man. It's really like that. And for a lot of people that are just starting, it might be tough like that at a certain extent. Hopefully you're buying right, so you have some wiggle room, you have cash flow, but these things happen.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest mistake I made in the very beginning was I never was setting aside any money for maintenance.
Mm.
But I was all putting the thing that was powerful though was I wasn't setting it specifically aside for maintenance. It was just going into the account. And so for 22 years, I never took money out of the real estate business.